Hi all, this is RN Tracy 2MD and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Tracy. Hi, and my name is RN Tracy 2MD just because I'm a registered nurse who went back to school to become a doctor. So I'm currently in my second year of medical school. And if you clicked on this video, it's probably because you yourself are currently studying for the MCAT, or you're just curious and want to know what's going on in the MCAT world, the MCAT streets, I don't know. But whatever brought you here, welcome. And again, if you clicked on this video and you are studying for the MCAT, it's probably because you saw the title and you saw that I went from a 510 to a 520. So I ended up scoring in the 97th percentile in the MCAT. And within that, I also scored in the 98th percentile for the CARS, but my initial CARS score wasn't very good at all. I believe I scored like a 126 or 127. It just wasn't that great. So throughout this video, I want to provide some tips that I use to improve my MCAT score and basically just explain how to study for the MCAT. So unfortunately, or realistically, I don't remember a lot of the actual content on the MCAT, but what I do remember is how I studied for the MCAT. And so that is what I'm going to try to go through with you. And I'm just going to be discussing, first of all, what the MCAT actually is, resources that I would recommend and hopefully would save you some money and time. And then finally, I want to go through what I think is a great schedule, a study schedule to use to study for the MCAT. So if that sounds great to you, please stick around and continue watching. All right, so to get started, we're just gonna go ahead and have a look at what the MCAT actually is. And I do have my laptop here just because I wanna make sure I'm giving you the most accurate possible information. And sometimes I don't remember everything or like the long form of everything. So to get started, the MCAT is the Medical College Admission Test, and it's a standardized test used here in Canada and the US. It's broken down into 4 sections. And so that includes chemical and physical foundations, the CAR section, or critical analysis and reasoning skills. And then the 3rd section is biological and biochemical foundations. And then we also have psychological and social foundations. So usually I don't say these entire words. I think most people know these sections as like psych, soc, phys, chem, or biochem, and CARS. So that's probably what I'm going to say throughout the video. I just want to get started and use the actual names. So the exam itself is going to be 7.5 hours. So that is the total sitting time, but you are going to get breaks in between. So you're going to get a chance to leave the testing area and take a break. So the first break is going to be in between or come right after the Chem Phys section. So Chem Phys is going to be your first section, followed by CARS. So in between that, you're going to get 10 minutes. And then in between CARS and biochem, no, sorry. Right after CARS, yeah, so in between CARS and biochem, you're going to get a 30-minute break. And then following biochem, so in between biochem and then going into psych soc, you're going to get another 10 minutes. So you're always going to have a little bit of time to gather yourself up, which you're going to need. The test, it's interesting because the test is long, but also fast at the same time. And when you take it, you'll understand what I mean. Because once you do a section, you're going to feel like you've been sitting there forever. But while you're actually doing the section, it feels like 5 seconds are going by just because you're going to feel really tight for time. And that's just the reality of how it is. And part of learning how to study for the exam is going to be learning how to manage your time so that you're able to complete all the sections. So yeah, that is it for in terms of like logistics of how the exam is actually conducted. Oh, another thing that I wanted to mention is that there are no calculators that are used during this exam. And there are quite a few calculations, especially in the physics chem section. So you're going to have to, go back to your arithmetics from like grade school and everything. You have to do all of this in your head, not in your head. You'll have to do all of this by yourself. So there's no calculators at all. But the thing is, you are going to be provided with this booklet. It's about 9 pages. I think it's 9 pages. And it's a laminated booklet, so you're going to be writing on it with a marker, but it's not a dry erase marker, which I was confused with at first. So it doesn't erase off of the paper, so you're just writing on it to do any kind of calculations throughout the test. And I think you get to save it for all sections of the test, and I'll explain how it could be applied even to the car section later on. But yeah, so that is what you're expecting for the exam. So I just want to give you like a good visual. So you walk in, there's a bunch of computers. It looks like a computer lab, and that's where you're going to be taking your exam. If you're somebody who has sat for any other like professional exams, like the NCLEX, like I sat for the NCLEX, something similar to that. So you walk into a room, there's a bunch of computers, and then there's also headphones, and I think you could get earplugs as well. You go to your computer, and then you also are going to be given that laminated piece of paper and a marker. And so that's kind of the setup of what the exam actually looks like, just in case you want to have a visual of what to expect. So I think that's pretty much it. That covers it in terms of logistics. Scoring. So in terms of scoring, as you know, each section is going to be scored, and then you're going to get a cumulative score as well. So each section can range from 118 to 132, and then cumulatively you can range from 472 to a perfect score of a 528, which I actually know, I guess, I know somebody who has scored a 528, but yeah, that's crazy. But yeah, it's possible. Anything is possible. I didn't think it was possible for me to score in the 97th percentile, so anything is possible. But yeah, and just in terms of the scoring is based on a scale, or is a scale that's based on the exam difficulty. So you don't have to worry about like choosing a certain date. I know there's definitely some myths, and I've seen some of these myths on Reddit, like thinking that if you choose a specific day, the exam may be easier or harder. Honestly, even if the exam is easier or harder, it really doesn't matter, just because, again, it's going to be scaled to the difficulty of the exam. So for instance, if your friend ends up taking the harder exam and they get 5 questions wrong on each section, and they end up with, I don't know, like a 515 score, if you take the easier exam on the other day and end up with 5 questions wrong on each section, you're likely going to get like a 510 or something. I'm just giving like random numbers, but just to illustrate what I mean. It doesn't matter which test you sit for, just because it's scaled by the exam difficulty itself. So don't worry about choosing a specific day because you've heard it's easier or whatever. It doesn't matter. So I think that basically covers it for the beginning part. And so moving forward, I just want to touch a little bit on the history of the MCAT and whether or not it's even a valid test for understanding if somebody is going to be suitable for the clinical environment. So we'll get to that next. All right, so next I want to focus on the history of the MCAT. And the reason that I wanted to take some time to talk about the history of the MCAT is just because the history or how well the MCAT assesses whether or not somebody is going to be a good doctor. It's important to understand that, because a lot of people can feel really discouraged when they take the MCAT. I know I was discouraged by my first score. And so by talking about the history a little bit, and maybe talking about a couple of research papers on the MCAT as well, you can get a better understanding of how to focus your energy and how to feel about your scores. So that's what this section is, but you can definitely skip it and go towards what you need to actually study for the exam. So in terms of the MCAT, when it got started in 1928. And for the most part, when it initially started, it was mostly about memorization. And so the focus was on like just getting down pure science facts. And over time, it progressed to including more critical thinking and reasoning skills. And so the CAR section and everything like that was added over time. And basically what the MCAT is supposed to do, it's supposed to measure a student's ability to do well or assess how well a student can do on medical licensing exams. So in the US, they have their step 1, step 2, and step 3 USMLE. And in Canada, we have our MCCQE. So the reasons that schools use it is because they want to be able to, as much as they can, try to predict how students will do on those licensing exams. But to make sure that you're not completely, like, you don't feel so bad for not doing well on the MCAT, there are tests that show how well the MCAT is actually correlated with these licensing exams. And in one study, it showed that the MCAT was only moderately correlated with step 1, and in terms of step 2 and step 3, barely correlated. And then in terms of clinical practice, not a reliable way to assess whether or not somebody is going to perform well clinically or not. So hopefully you feel better about that if you're not doing well preparing or feeling like you might not be a good doctor because of the MCAT, because it's not true. And then other issues with the MCAT is that there are structural issues for that cause some people to do poorly on the exam. And there is a test as well that I was able to find, and I'll include that in the description box if you want to understand a little bit more about it. But they looked at various demographic factors such as race, parents' income, extracurriculars, like just various factors. They looked at various factors that displayed that inequities play a part in how well somebody's going to do on the MCAT, and that's no different than any other standardized exam. And so what is happening currently, at least in Canada, I know, there are certain schools that don't even use the MCAT competitively. Instead, what they do is they just use it as a cutoff. So for each section, as I said before, you can score anywhere between 118 and 132. So what a school might do is say for each section, what I'm accepting is a 125. And so that's how the current school that I'm at, that's how they score the MCAT, or that's how they use the MCAT. And then what a lot of schools in Canada do focus on, though, is the CAR section. So even if they use other sections as just cutoffs, they will end up using the CAR section competitively, which is why I'm sure a lot of people are interested in this video, just because they are concerned about CARs. The truth is, I cannot get you to score a certain amount on the CAR section. All I can do is provide you with a couple tips, and when I get there, I'll explain what those tips are. But the CARs it's really hard to provide structured advice on how to score well in that section. So, but I'll get to that in just a moment. So that's basically it for the history. Yeah, don't feel bad if you're not doing well on your practice exams or anything. But yeah, let us now move our attention to what I'm sure you guys actually want to know about, which is the MCAT content. Okay, so moving forward, we can talk about the actual content on the exam. And so as I talked about, there are those 4 sections of the exam. And really, you are not required to take any kind of prerequisites, but I would definitely recommend them. And the reason I'm saying that is just because I had a strong foundation in all of these topics, and I'm sure that contributed to me having done well on the MCAT. But it's not necessary. There are some people that are able to study this on their own and still do fine. But if you can, I would recommend taking these as prerequisites. So the things that I would recommend taking as prerequisites include a Psych 101, a Soc 101, Chem 1 and 2, Orgo 1 and 2, Physics 1 and 2, Calculus 1. Calculus, it seems a little bit off just because it's not tested directly in the MCAT. However, because they do not provide you with a calculator, it would be nice to have a little bit of knowledge on calculus in terms of like logarithms and all that. But again, not necessary. You can learn to do that on your own really quickly. Anatomy and physiology, Biochem 1 and 2. And then I threw in there philosophy. Not necessary again, but sometimes it can help you with the CAR section, like any kind of critical reasoning. So, I mean, it's a fun course. I thought it was a fun course to take, and I would recommend it in terms of helping you out a little bit with cars. So that is it in terms of things that I would recommend as prerequisites. And again, I'm just saying that because I have a whole undergrad in life sciences where I got exposure to all of these. And then I also went back for nursing. So I was exposed quite a bit before taking the exam. And I'm sure that's something that helped me out. So resources that I would recommend that you use, there are 5 of them. And 3 of them are paid, and then 2 of them are 3 of them are unpaid or have unpaid options, and then 2 of them you have to pay for. So for each of the resources that I list, I want to talk about which ones are free, which ones are not, and then I also want to talk about what they're best used for. And so the first one I'm going to mention is Khan Academy, and Khan Academy is completely free. And what I would recommend is that you go onto their website, and then there's an MCAT section, and they have literally every section of the MCAT. So it's going to be great to use for your content review. So this is going to be your main resource that you can use for content review. And then they also have quizzes, which I thought was nice. So it really helps to test your knowledge, but it's not going to have anything that looks like the MCAT. This is only for the basic knowledge content review. So again, the benefits of it is that it's comprehensive, and that's basically it for Khan Academy. So number 2, I'd recommend Medical School Coach MCAT Prep, and that's on YouTube. So again, completely free. And so I would recommend that you use Khan Academy as like your gold standard for content review. But Med School Coach is going to be great to supplement for certain areas, such as the harder sciences, or what I consider like the harder things like physics, chem, biochem, orgo. I thought that Med School Coach did a really good job of providing tips for how to navigate those kind of questions. So I'd also recommend them as part of your content review. Number 3 is going to be UWorld. And so UWorld, you're going to have to pay. You're going to have to put up the money for that one. It's going to be about $350 USD for, I think that's for their question bank. But I would say that it was worth it. And I use it for the NCLEX, which is maybe why I was really used to the interface and everything. But I find it to be really good, and to have really good breakdowns of explanations for answers to questions, if that makes sense. So I don't think it's really well organized. I wouldn't use it for like strictly content review. But once you're at the point of your studying where you're trying to integrate and start to test yourself, it's perfect for that. So it's perfect for taking practice or doing practice questions, but it's not necessarily going to be the best intent in terms of content review, especially if you have no background in these areas. So number 4 is going to be Jack Weston. Jack Weston, there is an unpaid option, although now I see that there is paid options as well. There used to only be unpaid options. And so you're going to be using that for your cars. That is going to be your main thing that you're using to practice for cars before you get into your AAMC material. And so the good thing about Jack Weston is that it is a little bit on the easier side, which is good. It builds up your confidence. And I find that the logic is still the same as AAMC or the actual MCAT, so which is good. Some other resources, some other like third-party resources are going to have very hard cars, but the logic doesn't necessarily, from what I saw, it doesn't necessarily match up with the MCAT itself. And so I feel like it's hard for no reason. For instance, I would say UWorld Cars was hard for no reason. If you're somebody who has seen Blueprint Cars is hard for no reason. It's not actually correlated to the actual MCAT. So I think it's just a waste of like hypertension, like getting you nervous for no reason. So that is Jack Weston. And then number 5 is going to be AAMC, so Association of American Medical College. So that's going to be your gold standard for once you're actually getting into your test taking time, when you're wanting to do your full-length exams and practice anything that really reflects the MCAT, that's what you're going to be using. And this resource is not free, so again, you're going to have to be paying. But like I said, for the UWorld, I think it's worth it. So if you're trying to find things that are truly worth it, I would say that this is definitely one of them. And so what I would recommend that you use AAMC material for is their full lengths. And so they have 6 full lengths. So I would purchase all the full lengths. And then I would also definitely purchase, well, actually it depends on what you're struggling with. But at the time I was struggling with cars. And so I purchased their cars QBank as well. So yeah, that is my recommendation in terms of material. Next, I'm gonna go section by section and explain how you should study for each of those parts of the MCAT. So next, I wanted to go section by section, and kind of explain the content review, the practice that you're going to have to do, and anything extra that I feel would be helpful information when studying for that section. So to get started, we're going to be focusing on biochem. And I've already stated before that Khan Academy is going to be basically your gold standard for most of your content review. So for biochem, I would definitely say it's going to be Khan Academy. And then in terms of practice, I would use UWorld, but it depends on what you decide to end up purchasing. So you can do like your own cost benefit analysis and see, is it better to get UWorld material? Is it better to get AAMC material? The reason I recommend UWorld is just because I'm a really visual person. And so with UWorld, what was nice is that whenever they would have explanations for the answers, so when you do practice questions, if you get them wrong, they would be associated with this entire explanation. Sometimes those explanations would have great visuals to really nail home how to understand that the content. So that's why I personally like UWorld, but it depends on what your preference is. So you're going to have to assess that for yourself. And then something else, like an extra thing that I would recommend in terms of when you're studying for this section, is I would definitely go ahead and try to read a couple research articles. So any research articles that maybe are more recent that have to do with biochem. I think biochem is probably going to be higher yield. I have no relationship with AAMC or the MCAT, but I just feel that usually biochem might be higher yield in terms of passages that they tend to include on the MCAT. And so if you're not familiar with research articles, I would go ahead and familiarize myself with that. And if you're not aware of how the MCAT is formatted, each time before they ask questions, you're presented with a passage. And so for any of the science sections, usually those passages are going to be out of some kind of journal. So they're going to be like a research article. So I would definitely get familiar with, the different areas of a research paper, like methods, results, discussion, like all that kind of stuff, just so you're not completely shocked when you go into the exam or when you start practicing the test, I guess, because you're going to practice before you go into that exam. So I would say 2 to 3 is enough, and then you're just familiar with what it looks like, but it never hurts to do more. So for the physics and chemistry section, what I would recommend for content review, I would recommend for content review to start with Khan Academy, but the thing that's going to be most helpful is going to be Med School Coach in that area. So Med School Coach, they just do a really great job at explaining content for physics and chemistry and orgo and everything like that. So I would definitely rely on that. And again, it's going to be you choosing between UWorld and AAMC material in terms of practice. And then other things to consider when you're studying for this area, I would also recommend to read a couple of research papers that have to do with clinical things that apply physics. For instance, maybe there's something to do with audiology, so maybe there's sound in there. sights, to do with like lens equations, like anything that you could find that has that kind of vibe to it, whatever, that kind of feel for it, I'd recommend reading those to get used to how those papers are formatted. Another thing that I've already mentioned, but I just want to make sure that I stress, is there are no calculators. Make sure your arithmetic is on point. Make sure that you are comfortable like calculating a pH, like logarithms or estimating logarithms. Figure out how you can do that before you get to your test, of course. And just be aware that you're going to be provided with a pen and paper, the laminated paper with a pen. So that is what is going to you're going to be looking forward to. And so that is what I would recommend when you're practicing as well. Have a piece of paper and a pen. Psych Soc. So for Psych Soc, I would say Psych Soc that was like my favorite section. I felt like it was so straightforward. I don't know if that's just bias, but I took a lot of psych courses as well, so maybe it is bias. But content review, conicotomy is sufficient. And then practice, anything is really sufficient for Psych Soc, just because it's a very straightforward section. UWorld, AMC, any third-party resource is going to be great for Psych Soc. So my only like tip there, again, like I've been saying, it's very knowledge heavy, so it's very straightforward. So that's all you're going to be really focusing on. Car section. So the car section, content review, there's not really a content review. I think you just have to get straight into it. And the thing that you're going to be using to practice initially is going to be Jack Weston, because that is going to be your free resource. So I would start off with Jack Weston. And I think people want to have some tips on this area. And so what my own recommendation is you want to get a feel for what the author is trying to say. So if you could step back and understand, like all of this is going to feel really fluffy, but this is the best that I have for you. You're going to want to take a step back and understand, what is the author trying to say? Are they arguing for, against, or are they being neutral in whatever topic that they're presenting? And then another thing that is really going to help you out, just because I would say Cars, I don't know if it's because I'm a slow reader, but Cars was really a test of time. So how fast can you work through reading those sections and then answering? So what I would do is, because how it's formatted is, you're going to get like a long passage. After this passage, they're going to ask you questions based on that passage. By the time you get to the questions, you might have already forgotten what exactly was in the passage. Even though you might understand in general what the passage was talking about, they might ask you some specific questions, and it's nice to know where to find the answers to those. So what I would do is, for each paragraph, I would literally, on that piece of paper that you get, the laminated piece of paper, I'd put down P1, P2, P3, P4, like for all the paragraphs that are in that passage. And then beside P1, if there's two things that are in that paragraph, whatever those two main things are, that's what I would write down. It could have just been one word or like a really quick sentence. And by doing that, you save yourself a lot of time when you get to the point of the test where you're answering the question. Because maybe they're asking you about, I don't know, like ancient Rome and columns or whatever. And maybe it's only in the first section where they mention that the columns had like circular, I don't know, like, but you know that the passages are really weird, right? So, or they can be really weird, but at least you know that in paragraph 1, you're just like, oh, like circular things on columns. So you know to go back to that paragraph if you need to quickly look up specifically what was that question asking. So that is how I would approach the car section, just having a really good understanding overall. What is the passage saying? What is the author trying to argue? Like, are they for, are they against, are they neutral? And then how I would organize my time is by putting those paragraphs like P1, P2, P3, and writing a couple words per each paragraph. That is how I would approach cars. I would advise against, this is something that people like to do to save time, but I don't think it actually is effective. I would advise against trying to go to the end, read the question, and then come back to the section. I don't know, maybe there's some people who are successful in doing that, but for me, I never found that whenever I tried that approach, I didn't find that I did well when I was practicing. So for me, the best approach is the one that I've recommended. Get a vibe, paragraph by paragraph, write a couple sentences, go answer your questions. So hopefully that's helpful. If you have further questions, honestly, I don't know that I can provide better explanation just because I took this test, 3 years ago now, and you kind of forget how to actually do the test. You kind of just remember how to study for it, right? So the last section I'm going to do is the study outline and what I would recommend in terms of a study schedule. All right, before I move on to study schedule, just because I know the CARS is a really hard section, I just wanted to add a little bit more into this. It's not a lot, but I'm just trying to do all the things that I know were helpful for me. I'm a really visual person, like I said before. And so as I was doing the CARS, something that helped me is really, really trying to get into the mind of the author and try to visualize like the words coming to life. So if it was some kind of, like I gave the example of the columns like in ancient Rome, because sometimes it is a really dry passage and it's just literally describing what do columns look like. And so I would really try to like visualize all the words that the author had, and that kind of helped me out. I don't know if that little bit of advice is helpful at all. It's like really generic advice, but I really tried to, in my mind, create a picture of what was going on. And that could also just be because I'm not somebody who reads enough, and so I have to do that. But yeah, that's something that helped me out with CARS as well. Okay, now we can move on to the study schedule. Okay, so now it's time to focus on a study schedule. And so I'll just kind of go over the 4 phases of the study schedule, but I'm going to have a more detailed outline of what I think is a good study schedule. It won't go date by date. It'll be more of a suggestion of time frame that I think you should spend on each thing. But you will have to put it into your calendar and do date by date. That's something that seems like a paid service. I won't be able to provide that for you. But what I would recommend, because I was working full-time when I was studying for this exam. I took it 2 times, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. Yeah, I did, because how would I have gone from 510 to another score if I didn't take it 2 times? So I took it 2 times. Both times I was working full-time. The first time I took it working full-time, honestly, I did not take it seriously enough at all. So it was like, and also I wasn't very confident that I was really going to do this. And so my studying was kind of like prolonged for like a year and then some. And then the second time I took it, I was pretty certain that I really wanted to go to med school. It was just a matter of making the time to study. I took about 6 to 8 months, but again, that was me working full time. So it's going to vary a lot. It could take as short as 3 months, which is the study schedule that I actually have for you. But you can stretch that study schedule based on your own time, your own time frame and everything like that. So the first thing that I would recommend that you go ahead and do is book a date so that you know what time you're working with. So right now, we're in April. So I'd recommend to book something at maybe 4 months out. So that's not too bad. Like if April, May, June, July. So maybe end of July would be a recommendation. If you're just getting started right now and you're only focused on the MCAT, I would recommend July. So once you have booked that date, something I would heavily invest in, doesn't have to be a paid service, but I would make sure that I find some kind of system or app that is going to help you to schedule out your time, something that's going to help you to get organized. So at the time when I was studying for the MCAT, my whole life was in the hands of Trello. If Trello told me to do something, that was what I had to do. And then I would plead with it if I needed to move some things around. That was how I was living my life, according to what Trello told me to do, even though I'm just making a joke because I'm the one who put the things into Trello. But what I'm trying to say is make sure when you set your schedule, you hold yourself accountable to it. Just because the more you start moving things around, you're eventually going to want to push back that exam date. So it's best to have a study schedule where you've already put in all your dates and you give yourself some wiggle room in case you can't meet those dates. And I'll explain a bit more about what I mean by that. But that's specifically for when you're taking your full length exams. Give yourself a little bit of wiggle room in case you don't take it on the date that you plan for. So I wanted to include this example of a great study schedule. So it doesn't completely align with what I said in the video, but that was a recommendation based on what I did or what I found helpful for me personally. But this is also a really great study schedule. I remember looking at this when I was studying for the MCAT. And so it outlines really well what you should do day by day. But what's great about this is that you can modify it depending on how long you'd actually like to study. So for instance, even though this is saying for 3 months, if you ended up making it for 6 months, all you would do is like add an extra day to the days that are already listed here. And what's also great here is that you can see the full lengths are scheduled. And so this is exactly what I was talking about. You need to schedule your full lengths and stick to that date. Another thing that's great about this that I forgot to mention when I was talking earlier is an inclusion of a full length review day, which I always did, but I completely forgot to mention. You're going to need almost a full day of review. So after you do your full length exam, it takes a lot of energy out of you. And then the next day, you need to spend that day reviewing your answers, and then maybe have a break in between. But in this schedule, I guess they're a little bit tighter. So they went straight from reviewing the exam to the next day studying some more content. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this as well. And I'll include this as well in the document that I end up uploading or creating. I'll include a link to this because it's just a really good resource. So here they went from the content only phase to focusing on practice. So during this time, they're using more of the AAMC practice exam. So I think this is perfect. So there is going to be a couple phases that I've broken this down into. So phase 1 is just going to be assessing your baseline. So at this point, don't do any content review. You don't have to. No content review needed. Go ahead and take your first test. So you don't have to use up your AAMC test for this. You can use another third-party resource. And at that point, you're not really trying to really assess what you know or how well you're going to do on the MCAT. It's just to get a feel for the exam. Really, that's all it is. The first time you do this is to give yourself like a reality check of this is what I expect the exam to look like. And so this is how I should be studying for this exam. But like I said, some of those third-party resources can be unnecessarily hard. So the one I used was Blueprint. I took the Blueprint assessment test and it was unnecessarily hard, but it was just to get my feet a little bit wet and get used to taking the test. All right, so once you've already done that, I think it's really important to make sure that you're taking these tests just to remove that anxiety of test taking. So don't leave it till the end before you start taking your full lengths. Take them as you're going along. So I'll explain why. I'll explain what that looks like. And the reason why is just to make sure that you're not making yourself anxious about this test. You need to get used to being comfortable even just sitting down for the test. Okay, phase 2, you're going to be doing content review. And I would recommend anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks, depending again on what is your baseline. Have you seen these courses before or not? So obviously, if you haven't seen these courses, the longer it's going to take for you. So in those 4 weeks, or 4 to 6 weeks, maybe a week and a half each is going to be dedicated to each section. Up to you. I like to focus. I'm really like tunnel vision, so like I could only do one thing at a time. I didn't like doing a little bit of chem and then the next day do some psych. A week and a half of chem phys, a week and a half of psych soc, like that. All right, phase 3 is going to be your integration phase. And this phase is going to take anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks. And this is where you're really heavily getting into practice questions. So I would say by this point, maybe 70 to 80% of content review should be completely done. And your focus should be on taking those practice tests or taking practice questions in general. So at this point, the main tool that you're going to be using is going to be Jack Weston and UWorld. And every 2 weeks, you should be doing a full-length exam. If you're stretching it out, you can make it like every 3 weeks, but every so often you should be doing a practice exam. And what I was saying before is make sure you schedule those practice exams so you're taking it seriously. When you sit down for those full-length practice exams, treat it like it's the real thing. So, it's going to be 7.5 hours. Give yourself the 10-minute break, give yourself the 30-minute break, everything like that, just so you can really be used to what it feels like to take these exams. And also, like I was saying, it helps with the anxiety. So once you've already done it once, you've done it twice, it's no longer an anxiety-inducing process once you're doing it for real. So phase 4 is going to be your refinement phase, and that can take anywhere between 1 to 2 months. And at that point, you're going to be assessing how you're doing on these full lengths. So if you're at that point scoring about a 510 and above, then I would say it's good to maybe space out your exams for like 2 weeks or so between each one. If you're scoring a little bit lower, I would maybe go back at this point to some content review. Maybe there's some holes in your studying that you need to cover before you move forward. So yeah, that is essentially what I would recommend. And then at the end of your final phase, I would definitely leave some time for relaxation. So make sure that you're giving yourself some time between your last full-length exam and your actual exam day to just relax and not worry about any kind of content review or anything like that, even though I'm a liar because I know myself. I was probably in the library doing my last full length the day before the exam, which that's not great. But yeah, my recommendation is to relax before your actual exam day. Get good rest. I at least can say I did get a good night's sleep. Like I got a lot of sleep and everything like that. But I was very anxious, so I studied until the very last minute. Yeah, that is basically it. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that I wanted to add that would be helpful. Like all of these details I will include in whatever I create in the package. But I did want to stress to save the CARS key pack for like your last 4 or 5 weeks, just because that will give you the most accurate assessment of your CARS score. So again, up until then, I would just be using Jack Weston and then save CARS for like 4 to 5 weeks before your actual exam. The CARS question pack from AMC for a couple weeks before your actual exam. I think that's it. If I've missed anything, if you have any question, please comment them. I'm always willing to answer questions. People DM me all the time for different things. So long as I'm actually able to help, then I will. Otherwise, I'll try to find a resource that wasn't meant to end so abruptly, but I ran out of recording space on my phone. But I did still want to end off this video properly. So thank you so much for watching. And if you have any additional questions that I did not cover throughout this video, always feel free to comment them down below, or you can reach out to me directly and DM me, that's fine as well. But yeah, take care and happy studying. All the best. Bye. Baby.